Good Sunday morning, everyone. And we're starting a new chapter, a new essay from Angels, Demons, and Gods of the New Millennium. Today we're going to start chapter 5, Passing the Pylons. This is a chapter that I wrote about 45 years ago. Not 40, I didn't write it 45 years ago, but I wrote it many years ago. And it concerns initiation, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and, we'll see. Actually, it deals with the Egyptian Book of the Dead and a technique of surviving death. It starts with a little epigram, which is a little snippet from Crowley's Rite of Saturn. And there's two characters talking. There's the Magister Templi, who is the chief officer representing Binah and Saturn, and Brother Aquarius, one of the officers in the ceremony. Magister Templi says, "Let us enter the ark of increased knowledge." And Brother Aquarius says, "Master, what is increased knowledge?" Death. "Master, what is the ark thereof?" The grave. And Brother Capricornus joins Brother Aquarius, and they say together, "Master, how shall we enter it?" "Arise and follow me." Several years ago, while trying to relax over a pint, several pints, at a London pub, I became embroiled in a spirited exchange of ideas with the celebrated author of the occult. I had just returned from Manchester, where I officiated at degree initiations of nearly 24 members of an international magical society. My colleague of letters asked me if I planned to perform any magic while in Britain. I told him I'd done little else since arriving, and told him of the marathon initiations in Manchester. "I mean real magic," he interjected. "Pentagram rituals, hexagram rituals, invocations, evocations, god forms, real magic." I could hardly believe my ears. "What do you mean?" I protested. "Initiation is real magic. You know as well as I that a well-crafted initiation is a fundamental expression of the high magic of the Egyptians. Pentagrams, hexagrams, invocations, evocations, and such may be employed during an initiation, but they're tools, components of a greater ceremony of personal transformation. You can't get more magical than that." I fear my point was drowned in the creamy, dark amber of yet another round of stout, and the evening wearily reached its nadir when I was repeatedly challenged to mount the table and execute a star sapphire. This really happened. Okay. Nevertheless, the debate afforded me the opportunity to re-examine and organize my thoughts on the subject, and having been graciously allowed this sober forum to act as a Monday morning quarterback, I now hope to share some of the things I should have told him. The candidate. 25 years ago, and now this would be 45 years ago. I became the embarrassingly enthusiastic student of a modern mystery school that altruistically threw wide its golden doors of wisdom to promising seekers such as myself who could afford the price of a perpetual correspondence course. Although I never exhibited any natural psychic abilities, I was determined to become a first-rate visionary, so I dutifully practiced all the mystical exercise outlined for the new student. By tapping the limitless powers of my mind, I induced a drop of olive oil floating on the surface of a bowl of water to swirl with agonizing sloth in a direction it might not have otherwise swirled on its own. I bought a pitch pipe and chanted mystic vowel sounds. I held my breath and visualized parts of my body I'd forgotten I possessed, and stared at a candle until my eyes watered so much I saw everything they told me I'd see and much more. Every other month or so, the adepts at Mystery School headquarters mailed me an examination, which ruthlessly tested the proficiency of my envelope opening skills. Satisfied that my dues were competently paid and my address had not changed, the hidden masters then sent me a special monograph outlining the procedure for a ritual of self-initiation. Setting aside an evening when I would not be disturbed by objective reality, I set up the ceremonial accoutrements upon the altar of my upright grand piano. I lit the candles and the appropriate incense purchased from Mystery School headquarters, their own catalog, and proceeded with the one-man initiation. I took these ceremonies very seriously and delighted in executing them with as much art and precision as I was capable of mustering. As irreverent as I may sound today, writing a quarter of a century later, I must admit these initiations had a profound effect upon my life. Each simple ritual touched something very deep inside me, and never failed to leave me with the unambiguous feeling that I had taken the next step towards spiritual enlightenment. The footnote says, had I known how many initiatory steps lay before me, however, I would have torn the altar cloth off the piano and continued with my self-destructive career as a studio musician. Eventually, I became active in a nearby lodge, and for the next few years found myself serving on the ritual team for the weekly convocations and as an officer in temple initiations. I don't believe I'm violating my oaths too severely when I share with you the fact that the style of the initiation ceremonies, indeed the whole constitution of this particular order, was decidedly Egyptian. The walls of the local lodge were festooned with winged solar discs, images of Egyptian gods and hieroglyphs. The threshold of the temple room was skillfully painted to appear like the massive stones of an initiatory pyramid. At Grand Lodge headquarters, several of the administrative buildings were faithful reproductions of portions of the great temple complex at Karnak. And obelisks and pyramids and sphinxes adorned the grounds. On several occasions, I made pilgrimages to the headquarters to take temple initiations in the beautiful and spacious Grand Lodge Temple. I fell strongly under the spell of all things Egyptian. Living in Southern California, with its warm, dry climate, palm-lined trees, or palm-lined streets, lilies of the Nile, and pampas grass, it's very easy to dream and daydream a shirtless, shoeless life of an Egyptian artisan or scribe or priest. I muse that perhaps in a previous incarnation I lived along the Nile or served the gods in some great temple complex. Perhaps my mummy still lies undisturbed in some undiscovered necropolis, or has been pulverized by 19th century European colonists and sold as a miracle laxative. However, when it came right down to seriously studying Egyptology, I was soon to discover the limits of my dedication, not to mention my attention span. I half-heartedly tried to penetrate Budge's Osiris and his fragmented translation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but I only succeeded in putting myself to sleep. This was too much work. I finally concluded that the ancient priests encouraged a dying person to memorize the Book of the Dead in order to expedite the inevitable by boring them to death. Embarrassed by my failure to become a legitimate Egyptian adept, I secretly resigned myself to be a mystic poser and simply loiter at the threshold of the initiatory pyramid. Here, where the great light of Egypt shattered as it passed through my dilettante's prism, I imagined myself safe from its direct scintillating ray. Here I hoped I'd be allowed to gambol pretentiously upon the colorful but shallow steps of the outer temple. It seems I underestimated the spiritual momentum of the magic. The magic of Egypt. It is unimaginably strong. Its foundations are hewn deep and wide in the collective consciousness of humanity, silently and secretly supporting a countless hosts of institutions and philosophies not traditionally associated with the land of the Nile. Egyptian magic, I would discover, is extremely subtle and very, very patient. Next section is called The Magic. A little epigram from the old movie, The Mummy. 3 Tana leaves give him life, 9 give him movement. More than 9 make him an uncontrollable engine of destruction, such as the world has never known. Footnote. My dear friend S. Jason Black, co-author of Pacts with the Devil, frequently terrifies salad bar patrons by sticking his face in the grotesque light of the sneeze guard and quoting the above lines from the classic film The Mummy while fondling his spinach. It's true. I confess I've never been to Egypt, never spent a night in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid at Giza, never gazed upon the Sphinx or rode a camel to the Valley of the Kings. However, I have always suffered from a severe case of chemnophilia, and being a movie buff is probably the major contributing factor. As a child, One of the first movies I remember seeing down at the old Lakewood Theater was a colorful spectacle called Land of the Pharaohs that dealt with a pharaoh's obsession with the construction of a great pyramid that would shelter his body for eternity. After an assortment of side plots, including the titillating infidelities of his treacherous queen, the pharaoh is murdered, and the queen and her cohorts hypocritically preside over the final entombment ceremony deep in the interior of the pyramid. There, the high priest announces that all the mourners assembled will be honored to join the late pharaoh for eternity by being sealed with him inside the burial chamber. The film climaxes with the terrifying sight of huge stone blocks sliding into place by means of an ingenious process of hydraulics only using sand, while the wicked queen tries desperately to convince the high priest that there's been some kind of mistake. Had she had known she was going to be entombed, she would have worn her entombment dress. But nothing could stop the great stones from falling into place and sealing their fates for eternity. I was very impressed. Why are we so fascinated with the Egyptians? After all, there is no shortage of ancient civilization for us to ponder. What's wrong with the Hittites, the Babylonians, and the Minoans? Did they not also build great cities and monuments? Didn't their armies conquer their neighbors? Didn't their religions also spread with commerce and the sword? Why have so many of us who may otherwise exhibit no inclination to study ancient civilization become so enamored with the mysteries of Egypt? The answer, in my opinion, is one word: magic. Egypt certainly did not corner the market on magic. Magic permeated nearly every aspect of life in all the cultures of the ancient world. We know a great deal about the magical practices of the Babylonians. We know what gods they invoked for victory and love and battle, and what demons they evoked to torment their neighbors. These are practical skills for practical people. And from what we know about the Egyptians, they too were a practical people. But apart from a rich pantheon of deities, local and state, and the obligatory domestic superstitions, Egyptian magic appears to have been dominated by their funeral industry. Perhaps this is a distorted perception of the truth because so much of what we know about the Egyptians we've had to learn by examining the contents of their tombs. We'll probably never know the details of many daily activities of Egyptian life simply because the remnants of that life have not been so heroically preserved. We owe a great debt to the mummy mills. After all, what other magico art form sets out to preserve its handiwork for eternity? Mystery schools disappear. Books and manuscripts turn to dust. Sacred languages die. Religions and whole civilizations perish without a trace, but a first-class Egyptian funeral is forever. It's often said that forever is a long time, but nothing could be farther from the truth. Time is nothing to forever. The Egyptian magicians who established and perpetuated the elaborate procedures for the dead did not do so to impress or enlighten the curious minds of the future, They didn't put mummies on ice to await some cosmic awakening in the future. For them, afterlife is a continuous now, just like life. And the age-old search for eternal life is really the quest to attain consciousness of the continuity of existence. Immortality is the prize for those who would achieve this state of consciousness. From this enlightened vantage point, one no longer counts the string of spiraling incarnations as separate or even sequential episodes of experience. Rather, they're perceived as projected concurrently, one wall-to-wall reenactment of a single master adventure with specific and recognizable characters, ordeals, and crisis points. These crisis points are initiations. And the cast of recurring characters who populate this personal epic are our initiating officers. And that's where we'll leave it for today. Tomorrow we'll pick up on the section Initiation. I hope you are enjoying this. Have a great rest of the weekend, everyone. Continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.